That's how much he hated the television. And I got to tell you, the show needed someone to help this guy. As good as he was, you know, 75-minute motion picture. So they found a volleyball player, as he mentioned, from Hawaii, blonde-headed kid, who had made a little splash in Hollywood, Doug McClure. Doug hated that joke. Anyway, he could smile, he could ride a horse like he could ride a horse better than me, and I wasn't chopped liver. And he could do anything with a horse. Okay, then comedy. He was the Smiley Burnett to James Drury. He was the Pat Buttram, like Pat and Smiley were to Gene Autry. He was the George Gabby Hayes to Jim, that George was to Roy Rogers. Remember that? Oh, Roy. Well, I remember that. I'm an old guy. I never will forget that series. Happy Trails. Oh, never mind. Okay, now, she's a good singer, by the way. And I tell you, they hired probably the handsomest young actor in town at that time, this guy right here. Now, riding a horse is another matter. But he told me when we were watching the shuttle flying over, he said, you know, I lied. And I knew what he was going to say, because I'm a horseman. He said, I told him I could ride, and I couldn't. And you know, that was verified on the show. And they hired people, they hired a cast, second to none. I couldn't, and all through the Virginian, they kept adding people like this great actor, Quine, you know, Sara Lane, she looked more like a pioneer woman than anybody I've ever seen other than this girl. Frank developed a character called Bessie. It wasn't in the Virginian when he made the format. And this girl sure took that damn part. And in America and all over Europe and all over Asia, and most of you know, she became beloved as the epitome of the pioneer woman in the West at Shiloh Ranch, and I will never forget her work. It was so pure and simple. They hired Randy Boone. Randy was so natural in his acting. I never knew when he was acting. He was like Will Rogers. He would stand up there and kick a little shit and mumble. And I said, what did you say? He said, I gave you my first line in the script book. I said, oh, okay. So, I mean, he was that natural, that good. That's called film acting. You didn't know he was acting. He was brilliant in front of the camera. He could sing. That's the kind of quality we had at the beginning. I wasn't in it for 2 years. It wouldn't have succeeded had I been there. And it was an amazing amalgamation of great acting and talent, of great camera ability. Unbeknownst to these young kids, they knew how to work in front of a camera. The low-key guy here, he blew them away. So that's what I want to say about Frank. Frank brought this together, and I will never, ever forget Frank's work, and I wish he'd call me up sometime.
Okay, Jim, what do you think that Clarke brought to the show as Emmett Wright?
That's a unique and palpable sense of danger and mystery. That was reached out right to the screen at you. You never knew what he was thinking. You almost never knew which side of the wall he was on, because he never came down on one side or the other until he was damn sure what was right and what was wrong. It was just such a joy and a pleasure to work with him. He constantly threw bolts of lightning at you. You had to somehow catch him in a big catcher's net and throw him back. I'll never forget working with Lou and what he brought to the show. It was a whole new dimension, and I mean that sincerely. You should have won an Academy Award and some of that stuff. Yeah. Well, yeah, right. You should have come to an autograph show and see if anybody would remember you, right? Yes. Yeah, you said this right too. So, this man is just He's such a pleasure to be around, and he doesn't even know it. He doesn't even know it.
To me, Phil is one of those people that has never met a stranger when you walk up to him. He's never met a stranger in his life.
It's just great. Just great.
On the other side of the coin, what happened in the last year? Well, I mean, all of a sudden, Doug McClure's got this big mustache, and Lee Majors is on there, and You're Not On Enough, and they changed the title, and Stuart Granger, what the...
Yeah.
They wanted to give the show a new look. And everybody kind of signed on to it. I got myself a new horse and a longer gun. 5.5 inch barrel, 5.5 inch barrel, 7.5 inch barrel.
Longer sideburns.
Longer sideburns, much bigger hat. Kind of a sense of accomplishment or sense of entitlement, let's put it that way. I smoke cigars on the show. And I just mowed down anybody with my firearms, whatever they use. But the thing was, we all thought it was a good idea at the time, and it was a terrible idea. And the worst of the terrible ideas was putting Stuart Granger in the same position that Lee Cobb had occupied, that John McIntyre had occupied, that Charles Bickford had occupied, that John Dana had occupied. These were truly great Western actors. Stuart Granger came in and decided that he was going to be the big star of the show. He fired my crew. He fired my Academy Award-winning cameraman. He got all new people. He pissed off everybody in the entire organization. And he sunk the show. So thank you, Stuart, wherever you are. God bless you. So long, it's been good to know you.
There's an old saying that he couldn't wear the hat.
He couldn't wear the hat.
Don told me an interesting story. I'd never heard this about Charles Bickford. You mentioned Charles Bickford last night, what you were telling me?
Yeah. Charles, most of you probably know, was a very, very handsome, copper-haired, red-haired, actor. Up until he was working for MGM, and he got into a fight on a film there, and who was running MGM at the time? Do you remember, Clue? Anyway, it was somebody that said, "Listen, we don't need to put up with this anymore, Mr. Bickford. You're fired." And he said, "Oh, okay, that'll be just fine." And what he did, he was a very good businessman, and there was a vacant lot right on the corner of Culver Boulevard, and it faced MGM, and he bought that corner lot, and he bought a couple of old junker cars, and he put a huge sign up there that said Charles Bickford's Used Cars. And about 2 weeks later, he got a call from MGM, and they said, "We'd like to buy that property from you." And he said, "No, thank you." And then they offered him more. "No, thank you." I think after about the 5th offer, which was a lot of money, he said, "Okay." That's really awesome. It's a great story. One boy is that when he was this young actor and he got fired on that deal at MGM, he couldn't get a job in the business. So he started working in these real low-grade B movies. And one of them was one in which he had to play a lion tamer. And he still had his wonderful copper hair, and they said, "Mr. Bickford, would you mind, just kind of give us another shot and whatever." And they did about 2 or 3 shots where he and this lion that he was supposed to tame were doing it, and then he finally said, "Just one more shot." He said, "This is it. I'm not doing any more after this one." He went in there, and the lion mauled him, almost killed him, put him in the hospital, and his hair turned to silver. And that became the end of Charles Bickford, the leading man to this character actor, and he went on, of course, to be nominated for Academy Awards several times after that.
Okay, I told some of you earlier, this is your opportunity. It's kind of hard to see everybody, but raise your hand and we'll let you ask your question.
Stand up, have them stand up.
Yeah, maybe that would be good. Thank you. Stand there, the lights are up here. Yep, here, we got one right here. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hi. I wanted to ask Jim if you could talk about the difference in doing the main title ride-in the early seasons when you and Clue and Gary were in Thousand Oaks, and then in the last couple of seasons you were up in the mountains, and the main title looked considerably different. But can you talk about how many takes it took to do the main title? And
How many what?
well, how many takes it took to do the main title with the ride-in? And secondly, kind of a budgetary question, was there ever an episode that went extremely over budget that stands out in your mind? Earlier, Clue was saying that every episode had to be shot in 8 days. But out of all of those dozens or hundreds of episodes, I thought there might have been one episode that you went way over budget. Thank you.
Well, to answer your last question first, there were a couple of episodes, as I remember, that went to 12 days. And there was almost an atomic explosion on the top floor of the Black Tower. I'm going to have that. I'm going to have that. So we didn't get those directors back, and we didn't get those writers back, and I forget whether the shows were memorable or not. We were moving so fast I can't remember, but we made the most of them in 8 days, and one time they tried to make one in 7 days. And they made it, did it in 7 days. And then they came in and said, we're going to do the next one in 7 days. And I said, no, you're not. No way. And the first year, the pattern budget, I think, was, believe it or not, $130,000 a week to make the eight-day show, to make the 90-minute show. And the show was a big hit. So they said, well, we'll just cut $12,000 out of the budget. Just take out $12,000 arbitrarily and put it in our pocket. And I said, no, you won't. So these things came up from time to time, and no, they didn't. And they said that the Universal City Studio Tour took precedence over production, and they were allowed to come anywhere they wanted to come. And I said, no, you're not. We had a scene with a bank robbery. It started with a big explosion. We blew the bank, and then after a short time, bank robbers came out, piled on their horses, and took off over and under up the street just as fast as they could go. Within moments, a posse was formed, and they took off a lot slower because they weren't professional bank robbers and escape artists. So they took off a lot slower. While they were forming, there was a buggy wreck. Horse went over, clear over on his back, and the buggy went over on his back. In the meantime, in the center of the shot, I'm having a love scene with Angie Dickinson. And they run a tram through the back of the shot and said, there's a Dickinson there. Got in the car and I went home. So what are you doing up there? The work's down here. So when you get rid of the tram, I'll be back. We can't do that. I said, yes, you can. And I had to do that 2 years in a row, go home for the tram. They kept running back at me. The third year, they kept the trams completely away from the Virginian set, and we didn't have any more problems with it.
We also used to do 2 shows at a time to catch up if we couldn't, reach our...
I appeared in 5 episodes of the Virginian in one day. 5 units were shooting, so it's... in order to make the air dates and get it on the air at the right time, we had to run multiple units, and it was a logistical nightmare, and it could not have been done. You can't make the Virginian. Nobody can make the Virginian. It's impossible, but we did it, and I sure never had more fun in my entire life.